Spiritual?
Entrepreneurship.
Okay, spiritual entrepreneurship. Any entrepreneurs in the crowd today? Okay.
Do we do any chanting or just straight up? An hour. Maybe we're done. We're done. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So it's very good to see some fearless devotees. No fear of coronavirus.
Don't say the word, I don't know.
Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. All glories to the assembled day. Jai Lokanande. Om Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Savitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakanam Mayamarihi Swakarantikam Vachagavtaru Vishya Kripasindhu Devacha Pachitana Pavanekyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Radha Sivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Tevanan Sadasa Sadasa Makaram Krishna Bhagavan Swami. So, I was thinking about the topic of spiritual entrepreneurship because I don't believe we ever discussed it in here. We haven't. And this topic is, of course, connected to a number of verses from Bhagavad Gita, but we'll just go straight into the topic. And this is something which was shared with me by one of our senior leaders in the movement, Sannyasi, GBC, and Guru, Swami, Maharaja. And he just sent me a Christian article, which was discussing very interesting points. And from a very prominent Christian leader who is very concerned about spirituality on the planet, and of course this is something we're sharing. And interestingly enough, this is something which becomes more and more obvious to pretty much any thoughtful person on the planet, regardless of background or tradition, that every single problem we're facing in the world, and there are quite a few problems, are based not on something external, but on the state of people's consciousness. I was just recently I watched a documentary which is called The 11th Hour, produced by Leonardo DiCaprio, a very prominent Hollywood actor, and lately very prominent activist who joined hands with Richard Branson, who is the owner of the Virgin companies. And in New York, a couple of years ago, they organized a big event promoting global ban on beef consumption, which was very interesting. And so, somehow very, very prominent people, they become very active on the spiritual path. And this is definitely something which is part of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's plan for the development of the Golden Age. And of course, we are facing a lot of troubles on the planet, including the present trouble. We should not even use the name, right? Somehow there is a superstition, if you use the name, then what is connected with the name will appear or something.
Don't cough, Maharaj.
Okay. Okay. So, but the most important thing is that, even this virus, it's already proven, have started because of meat consumption, right? And so, pretty much all the troubles on the planet have the same origin. And exactly the origin Srila Prabhupada was against. Encouraging devotees not just to practice spiritual life, but live a very pure lifestyle. And in that movie I mentioned, they say very clearly that actually the source of the troubles, of course there are external reasons for all the troubles we're going through, like oil economy, oil-based economy, and this destruction of the human habitat, or destruction of the planet. but ultimately it comes to the consumerism mentality and greed and all the other problems connected to that, such as lust, anger, envy, etc., etc. And these problems, it's very interesting, one very prominent American scientist, he said, recently we were thinking, or no, he said, some time ago I was thinking that the problems we are facing, environmental crisis, can be solved with science and good practices. But then I realized that these problems are going much deeper. They are resulting from selfish mentality and greed and all other things. And he said, as scientists, we don't know what to do with it. So obviously, this is the task which is meant to be accomplished by spiritual practitioners. And therefore, spirituality really comes to the forefront of human effort globally. And so this article I was mentioning from Christian perspective of this very concerned man, he said, writing from Christian perspective, that the churches become vacant and closing down, not because we are lacking, clergy, like shepherds and priests, but because we're lacking one specific category, and that category he defined as spiritual entrepreneurs. And I think this idea comes from the corporate field. What are the qualities of successful entrepreneur? And I think this man just adopted them to the spiritual dimension, spiritualized them very much in the mood of Yukta Vairagya. And he said, we lack these kind of people. We lack these kind of creative spiritual leaders, because they are the ones who make the difference. And the examples he gives from Christian perspective are Jesus Christ and St. Paul. And so he gives 12 signs of spiritual entrepreneur. And when I read the article, I was struck with wonder how precisely those qualities they describe Srila Prabhupada. And basically, these are the 12 secrets of Srila Prabhupada's success. And I gave talks on the subject number of times. And many devotees shared that it helped them to realize many things. And of course, as Prabhupada's followers, we admire and we are really amazed by what he could accomplish in just very short time. And we all desire to follow in his footsteps and somehow succeed in a way which is at least somewhat similar to his, to seriously contribute to his vision and mission. Yeah? How many of you are on board with that one? Okay. And so that's why I think it will be very interesting for us to look into this special, we can say, qualities or features of, or signs Srila Prabhupada manifested. And first and foremost is thinking big. And we know that Srila Prabhupada was really thinking big. And it's always important to see the big picture. And of course, one very famous verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, that is 2:3:10, which Srila Prabhupada quoted a lot. He used to quote verses which were very close to his heart, which were kind of connected to his person. And so that verse is saying that basically Krishna consciousness is open to everyone, regardless what person's level is. Akama, sarvakama, moksha kama, udaradi, one might be devoid of all desires, or one might be full of all types of desires, or desire liberation. But the most important thing is that one has to be udarati. And udarati literally means broad consciousness, something what we call broad-mindedness, right? That the most important thing to succeed in Krishna consciousness is to be broad-minded, udarati. And then Tivrena Bhakti Yogina, Yajeta Purusham Param, that in this, under these circumstances, one can be fully focused on practice of Bhakti Yoga, Tivrena Bhakti Yogina, and Yajeta Purusham Param, and achieve complete perfection. And Srila Prabhupada was mentioning that this was always his problem, that he could never think small. Whenever he was thinking very big. And as we know, because he was thinking big, he succeeded really big. And it's very interesting how this big thinking helps to never become discouraged, regardless of any kind of obstacles we might face on the way. It's like those who know his life story, how he received the instruction of his spiritual master, and he tried to implement this instruction. First, he tried that in Jhansi, establishing a league of devotees, and that endeavor failed, so he failed locally. But then, next step, he decided, okay, I failed locally to make one town Krishna conscious. Let me make the whole country Krishna conscious. So he started preaching to politicians, meeting with Bahadur, what was his name? Lal Bahadur. Yeah, so meeting with number of important people and giving them their books and preaching to them, and even writing a letter to Gandhi. Somehow not much came out of it, so we can say he failed nationally, right? And if someone fails locally and fails nationally, what kind of conclusion one should draw from that? Most people draw the conclusion, okay, probably it's not worth it, right? No chance to succeed. But Srila Prabhupada's conclusion was very surprising. It was counterintuitive. I failed locally and I failed nationally, so let me try internationally now. And he tried and he succeeded. And my humble opinion is that Krishna made Prabhupada fail locally and nationally because he didn't want him to waste time on small things. He wanted him to do big, and as soon as he went internationally, he succeeded in a very short time. Like that. But What is the most prominent example of Srila Prabhupada's thinking big? It's very, very obvious that it can be seen from the very first purpose of ISKCON. And the first purpose of ISKCON says to systematically propagate spiritual knowledge to society at large and educate all people in the techniques of spiritual life in order to check the imbalance of values in life and achieve real unity and peace in the world. So I mean, in terms of thinking big, it's hard to imagine thinking bigger than that, but of course there are examples. Like one disciple glorified Srila Prabhupada, he said, Srila Prabhupada, it's so inspiring that you're thinking about benefiting the entire planet with Krishna consciousness. And you're succeeding so much. And Prabhupada looked at him, he said, entire planet? What are you talking about? I want to spread Krishna consciousness all over universe. And the disciple was flabbergasted by this statement. He couldn't believe, oh my God. He's such a big thinker that I can't even imagine his scale. You know, looking at the stars and thinking, okay, how can I make all these guys Krishna conscious? So thinking big, that's really first and foremost feature of spiritual entrepreneur. And so if we want to successfully follow in Srila Prabhupada's footsteps, we need to think big and see the bigger picture. And second sign of spiritual entrepreneur is very interesting, and that is belief that God can. And it's very interesting how the author defines the belief. Of course, we might believe theoretically that God can do anything, but practically that refers to the belief that Krishna can do anything using me as an empowered instrument, and that is really important. Believe in yourself as spirit soul with amazing potential, rather than thinking of myself as a body with all the limitations it is connected to. And he gave very interesting examples of Jesus Christ, who was not able to do anything, practically speaking, in his own village, because people were not taking him seriously. But once he went out of his village and came into the community where people had faith in him, there and then he was walking on the water and bringing dead back to life and curing people from incurable diseases and doing all kinds of miracles. And immediately, when you hear that, you can think of Srila Prabhupada, right? How he struggled so much in India to impress people about the importance of Krishna consciousness. Was he successful? No. Why? Because people were not taking him seriously. But once he went out, and in America he found a very good response and people who trusted him and who believed in him. And then he manifested amazing powers. And so what is the most important lesson we can take from that? My humble conclusion: never waste your time dealing with people who have no faith in you, that you can do anything good, right? Just be connected to two categories of people. Those who argue well-wishers, like spiritual master, right, is a primary example of someone who has no envy towards us, who just wants us to succeed, right, who is seeing our spiritual potential and who is trying to develop it, and supporters, those who want to help us to succeed in Krishna consciousness spiritually and practically, and never waste time with anyone else. Just forget about these people. There are 7 billion, more than 7 billion on this planet. So we can afford being selective in terms of our association. And so point number 3, to see abundance rather than scarcity. And that means basically point of view, because it all depends, and he specifically gives very interesting examples. He says, spiritual entrepreneurs see abundance, not scarcity. Give a dying church 10,000 pounds and they will think they're broke and need to conserve it. Give the same 10,000 pounds to a spiritual entrepreneur and he will see it as seed money to start something big. To a dying church, 5 leaders is defeat. To a spiritual entrepreneur, it's a start. Same facts, different mindsets. Attitude is everything. And so, yeah, we can see that Srila Prabhupada always saw abundance. When he was in America and his disciples were complaining that, Srila Prabhupada, we don't have money. He said, what are you talking about? You're living in the wealthiest country in the world. You just put your hand out of the window in America and in a few minutes, $100 bill will land into your hand. That is Srila Prabhupada's conviction, that money is everywhere. What are you talking about? You're lacking something. My God, it's a rich country. And I think UK is not much different from America in that sense. There is not, and this country is just stuffed with money. They just don't know what to do with it. And it's just a matter of connecting with it. And Srila Prabhupada kind of brainwashed his disciples to such an extent that they were thinking, how is he thinking like this? You know, because sometimes we do really struggle and we don't know what to do. And Shyama Sundar Prabhu described one very interesting episode, and they were paying rent for the center in San Francisco, and they struggled with it. And Srila Prabhupada was away, he was in America, he was in India. And Shyama Sundar Prabhu had the responsibility of, and San Francisco is not a cheap place, right, to rent something there. And they had no money, and he didn't know what to do. And he was very kind of depressed by the idea that they might not find money to pay the rent, and it was kind of very gloomy. Anyone who's been to San Francisco, it's a pretty gloomy city. You can hardly see any sun there, and very windy, very gloomy and very windy. Similar to London somehow. Pretty cold place. And he was walking along the street and he had this gloomy mood also. And the wind was blowing and he was thinking, what do I do? And suddenly he saw $100 bills flying into his face. And the street was absolutely empty. And I think he was with Malati also. And they were like, they didn't have much time to think where this money is coming from, so they were just grabbing it. And in a very short time, they collected enough for many, months' rent. And I think later they told Srila Prabhupada about this, and Prabhupada was not even surprised at this. He said, yeah, of course. So yeah, it's very important to have this mindset of abundance rather than scarcity to become a spiritual entrepreneur. And point number 4 is think vision first, then resources later. Because it's kind of similar to the previous point. There are plenty of resources available, and the most important thing is vision. Right? That there are plenty of people who can do anything for you, provided that you want to do something serious in your life, and you have clear vision, and you have clear plan how to execute this vision. And it's compelling, it's convincing, and then there will be no scarcity or no any lack of any resources. And again, it's connected to point number 1. If you think big, if you think about benefiting everybody, not just you, right? Like think of the example of someone who is thinking really small and only focused on oneself. What kind of model comes to your mind? Well, if you ask me, that would be beggar on the street. Really focused on himself only, right? And that's the reality he finds himself in. But the bigger you think, think of a prime minister, for example, right? So this is the man who is thinking nationwide, right? And so he has all the opportunities and resources connected to that kind of, mindset. Point number 5 is invest in personal and your team's development. It's really important to invest in people. And again, Srila Prabhupada comes in mind that was Srila Prabhupada investing into his team? Was he investing into his devotees? This article says that at least 10% has to be invested in people. But as far as Srila Prabhupada was concerned, he was investing 100%, more than 100%. Especially in the very beginning, he was investing what he even didn't have. Like he was inviting people for Sunday feast, and he didn't even have money to buy, products to cook it. So he had to go, in the morning he had to go out and sell his own books to have enough money to buy whatever was necessary to cook the feast. And then he would feed everyone, cooking, offering it to Krishna. And then with the prasadam, he would feed everyone with his own hands, and many times he would also clean after everyone. So he was investing more money than he had. He was investing 100% of his time and energy into his followers. And this was the reason why his disciples, his followers who later became his disciples, they were ready to die for Srila Prabhupada. They were ready to do anything. Simple reason, because Srila Prabhupada was ready to die for them. He was ready to do anything for them. And this was the reciprocation. So investing into people. And especially, if we talk about Krishna consciousness, we really have the best people on the planet. And so it's really important for us to invest into those best people to succeed. Point number 6 is to believe that whatever you're doing is bigger than you. That sometimes the spiritual leaders, spiritual entrepreneurs, they are accused in having big false ego. It might be true, but not necessarily it is true. Real spiritual leader, real spiritual entrepreneur, again, as we can see in the example of Srila Prabhupada, can perfectly combine huge ambition in service with amazing personal humility. And that, seemingly incompatible combination is the only key to unlock the success. And we can see Srila Prabhupada's example that personally he was very, very humble. But when it came to the mission, when it came to the service, he manifested huge ambition. And it's kind of amazing that, again, it's connected to thinking big, that a real mission should be bigger than our life. If someone can turn the phone off or at least put it on silent, make sure that...
Make a large donation to Maharaja.
And so, we can see that Srila Prabhupada achieved so much in his lifetime, and we'll glorify him for his achievements, and list is really endless, 108 temples. More than about 5,000 disciples, and about more than 60 volumes of very scientifically presented spiritual literatures, etc., etc., 14 times around the globe, and all of these in just 11 years. Unbelievable achievements. But Srila Prabhupada was saying that his success was only 50%. He could achieve only half of his mission, because he said the remaining 50% is to establish social, spiritual structure which supports Krishna consciousness, which is known as Varnashram. And so he expected his followers to continue his mission and achieve that goal. And so we can see a clear example that his mission was much bigger than himself. And this is why he succeeded in such a big way. Point number 7, ship first, improve later. The author says that perfectionists make terrible entrepreneurs, especially spiritual entrepreneur. If you waiting for perfect situation to start doing whatever you want to start doing, you will wait forever and die waiting. That's basically the reality. Because Srila Prabhupada, we can see, he never waited for perfect situation to start his mission. Those who know it, he started his journey to the shores of the United States on Friday the 13th of August of 1965. I mean, that could be the reason why he suffered 2 heart attacks on the ship. But he didn't care, because he was real spiritual entrepreneur. And so he just seized the very first opportunity, no matter how favorable or unfavorable it is, and he went ahead. And he was later saying that, yes, Krishna didn't send me the perfect people, right? He sent me a bunch of hippies, drug-crazed hippies. And with these people, he started executing his mission. So he was never waiting for perfect circumstances. Rather, he was taking the circumstances he was in and doing the best out of what he was calling bad bargain. So that's
Maharaj.
perfect
What was number
example.
7, sorry?
Ah,
What's the first line of number 7?
ship first, improve later.
Shit.
Ship.
Okay, alright, thank
Oh,
you.
I thought you said shoot or something.
Not shoot, no. Ship first, improve later. And Prabhupada literally shipped himself to America, right? Regardless of all the troubles. Point number 8, to be fine with ambiguity. That's very interesting. I mean, the article says, as a spiritual entrepreneur, ask a spiritual entrepreneur how they're going to do whatever they want to do. And the number first answer will be, I don't know. We'll just do it. And there is something powerful in that. If you have it all figured out before you launch it, your vision is not big enough. That's very interesting, right? Because you exclude Krishna factor from the picture, right? Because if you try to do something huge, it's very hard to figure everything out, to calculate everything out. But you just have to do it, counting on Krishna. And we don't know how many times Prabhupada was wondering, will it work out, whatever I'm trying to do, but many, many times, right? He didn't know how it will work out, but he was counting on Krishna and going ahead. Point number 9, risk it all without guarantee of success. And yeah, if you're not willing to risk, then there is no chance of winning big. And Prabhupada risked it all, risked everything, right? He even risked his life. But it is still calculated risk. I mean, he risked a lot, but he knew what he wanted, right? It's interesting that he didn't know, he didn't go to Zimbabwe or Philippines or, Congo to start his mission, right? He went to America. And even though he was invited to Butler, he didn't want to get stuck in Butler. At the first opportunity to went to New York, he went to New York. And even in New York, he didn't go to Bronx or, whatever, Queens. He went to Manhattan. Even though he could not afford staying in Manhattan, he found Bowery, which is, technically speaking, is part of Manhattan. But it's really like cheap and low class. But at least he was in Manhattan. So Prabhupada exactly knew what he wanted. And even though he was risking huge, but it was very well calculated risk. But it was risk nevertheless. Point number 10 is even more interesting. Never wait for consensus. And consensus means like everyone supports you, everyone agrees with whatever you try to do. And there is a joke about committee. No, about the camel. Anyone knows what the camel is? So they say the camel was meant to be the horse, but it was improved by a committee. So, if you waiting for consensus, if you're waiting that everyone would support you, everyone would agree with everything you are trying to do, it's very unlikely scenario. That was Srila Prabhupada waiting for consensus when he started his mission. many people supported him. Hardly, right? His own god brothers, they didn't give him much support. And even Sumati Morarji, right? What did she tell him? That Swamiji, why are you going to America? You're going to die there. And even that didn't stop Srila Prabhupada. So he was not waiting for any consensus. He knew, my guru wants it, it means Krishna wants it. So it doesn't matter if I get no support. That means I will go ahead and do it single-handedly. And we can see the results. Point number 11 is even more interesting. Let the critics talk while you act. Because it's very typical thing. And today I was sharing with Russian devotees also that it seems to be that there are two active categories in our society. That one smaller category are those who are trying to do something in Srila Prabhupada's mission, taking the responsibility. And the other, bigger category, those who criticize those who took the responsibility, and they don't do anything themselves. They just try to find faults with those who took the responsibility. And so, it's always the question, which group we want to be part of? Those who take responsibility and they don't, and then if you took serious responsibility, you won't have time and energy to find faults with other people, worry about what they do right or wrong, because, you have your own tasks to fulfill. And then, the other category is basically, those who just waste time trying to find faults with everybody. And so it's like, you either criticize or be criticized. Which one you choose? How many of you want to criticize? It's a joke because I never heard Jayant Prabhu criticizing anyone. So, but how many of you are willing to be criticized if you take responsibility? So, and that's unavoidable. That's the reality of this world. That if you take responsibility, you're bound to make mistakes. And if you make mistakes, you will be criticized. Right? But if you want to play safe and do nothing, of course, if you do nothing, you make no mistakes. So no one will criticize you. And then you can afford criticizing everybody else. But it's a pure waste of time. And last, and probably the most shocking point is break rules. But then the article says, quite obviously, you should never break scriptural rules. And great spiritual entrepreneurs never do. Their character is solid. But you are going to absolutely need to break some human rules if you're going to disrupt the status quo. Innovation always breaks rules. Why? Because innovation never asks for permission. It just innovates. Right? And so, again, it's really important to combine personal humility with big ambitions in the service. And if we look at Srila Prabhupada's example, was he breaking rules? Many rules, right? Some of the examples, allowing ladies to live in temples, giving sannyas and Brahman initiations to people who were not qualified according to Vedic standards, and doing many other things. And I mean, one thing he was openly criticized for by his own god brothers, performing marriage ceremonies for his young disciples. being a sannyasi, right? And Prabhupada said, what can I do? They need to get married. There is no one else to do the ceremony. So I have to do it. And my god brothers, they calling me matchmaker for this. So what can I do? I'll just carry on. So yeah, Prabhupada broke many rules, but these were all human rules. These were not scriptural rules. Okay? So this is because success means always disrupting the status quo. Right? And if you think about it, our tradition is all into disruptions, right? Like starting with Bhakti Saraswati, whom he was disrupting. Caste Brahmins, right? And they were so upset with him because he was taking their bread and butter, right? He was giving Brahmin initiations to those who were not born in Brahmin families. And Prabhupada took it so much further. Not only he was giving Brahmin initiations to non-Brahmanas, he was giving sannyas to those who were not even considered to be human beings, according to Vedic standards. So he was so much more creative than even his spiritual master. And this is what it takes to succeed. So I hope that these points, they give some food for thought. And I'm sure there must be some questions. Is it the same system that questions after the...
Yeah, you can do questions now, and then there's also questions and answer session.
Okay, question and answer. So I think we only have a couple of minutes
Yeah,
left,
you
right?
can do one or two.
Okay, one or two questions and then we'll continue with the remote. Yeah.
Is it possible? Shall I? Okay. Hello. So, is it possible to experience to reach Krishna consciousness if you do it through a different lens? So, I was brought up in the church, so I have like a different whole culture mindset. But a lot of my opinions tend to be more towards like the Eastern tradition of Christianity, more esoteric, and so it's more in line with like Krishna consciousness, really. So I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit about the. Do you think it's possible to reach a state of like Krishna consciousness through a different lens, like Christianity, for example?
Yeah, of course, that's why Srila Prabhupada, because he was, he completed Christian college when he was in Calcutta. He graduated, he never took the degree because he was doing that out of protest for British rule. But he learned a lot of philosophy and practices from Christianity, and then his conclusion was that original teaching of Christ is no different from original teaching of Krishna. So it's really the same thing. If you follow the pure Christianity, pure teachings of Christ, they will be no different from Krishna's teachings. Yeah. Hare Krishna. So one more, if there is one, and then we break for prasadam, I guess.
When you have an idea or a dream, how do you know if it's Krishna guiding you or if it's your imagination?
Yeah. For this, you need to have spiritual mentor, guide, or guru, and check with him whether it is really Krishna conscious or it's just coming from my imagination. Yeah. Alright, so thank you all. So we'll break for prasadam and we'll see you again at the questions and answers upstairs, right? Hare Krishna. Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
His Holiness Bhakti Rasayana Sagar Mахарадж ki
Jai.
So please let us express our gratitude and appreciation of Maharaj for coming and giving his association under such dangerous pretenses and circumstances by chanting 3 times loudly, Hari Bol! Hari Bol! Hari Bol! Hari Bol! So Holiness Bhakti Rasayana Sagar Maharaj ki So Maharaj will be doing questions and answers after we serve the feast. That will be upstairs in the seminar room. And those of you who know where that is, 2 more floors up, just above the shop. So we are going to serve the feast now, but just before we do, if I could have you